We've actually, put in more than one batch.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second and final meeting of the Board of Adjustment for the month. We have a full agenda as usual, so we'll dive right into it. After I just explain briefly the order of business which we typically follow, and that is that each item on the agenda is presented by the applicant, as many speakers as they want. 15-minute 15-minute is requested. If they want more than another 5 minutes, that can be voted by the board, provided it's asked for before the presentation starts. So that would be a total of 20 minutes max. That's followed by questions from the board, if there are any. Following that, we ask for speakers to come up who are in favor and to limit their comments to 5 minutes, followed by all the speakers, if any, who are opposed, if any. Again, limited to 5 minutes. And then the last call is 2 for or against speakers. There's no time limit at that point, but we ask, just out of the courtesy and for the sake of moving business along, that the comments be kept, right to the point and not drift off into side issues. So that's the method that we've used quite a while and seems to work fine. So having said all that, I'll go right to new business. There are no items withdrawn to announce tonight and no postponements requested, right? Good. And we have no items holding over as old business, so it's pretty straightforward. So, under new business, item A reads as follows. The request of Emily Morgan Revocable Trust for 2021 owner for property located at 127 Willard Avenue, whereas relief is needed to replace the existing front porch with a new covered landing with steps which require the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow a landing with steps which requires a 6-foot secondary front yard where 15 feet is required. 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be expanded, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 149 as Lot 37 and lies within the General Residence A GRA district. Who presents this to the board, please? Please come forward. And each speaker, we ask, please, whether you've been up before or not, say your name and address so we'll get the recording and the record accurate.
Sure. I am Emily Doe, and I live at 127 Willard Ave, Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Welcome. Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. Go right ahead and present you.
So,
and please, before you touch on the 5, I should have said that before. Be sure you touch on the 5 criteria.
Walk through the 5.
Yes, please.
Okay.
At some point in your presentation. Yes.
I actually don't have much of a presentation. I submitted the pictures. I'm looking to just expand what is there for those stairs currently to go just to the width of the house to the right. Yep, picture there. Thank you. And the intention is to create a covered porch so the weather doesn't come in, as well as I'm able to get my mail without walking out, and just give some dimension to the house. And the only difference would be is that currently this, in the sense of the other part, is the stairs are not to code, with the intention of making them to code and safer. They're rotting and really steep. So that's the secondary intention to this. So if we walk through 10.23321, there's nothing that would be contrary to public interest, only improvement in the neighborhood. For 10.22322, yes, the spirit of the ordinance will be observed because the steps and porch will not be encroaching beyond the existing house towards the secondary front yard. It's just going to stay within that line. 10.23323, there's no benefit to the public to deny this permit since it will only increase the look and safety of entering into the house. 10.23324, there will be no diminishing of values surrounding properties, improving the look and the safety of the house. And then the final one is the 10.23325. And just speaking about the fact that this house is a unique property, which is a corner lot on Willard Ave and Ash, which means that I have a front yard as well as a secondary front yard. The current home already encroaches on the setbacks, and I'm not asking to go beyond that. I'm just looking to increase the width of the current stairs in the porch. I'm also opening to add a cupboard over the porch to prevent weather coming into the house. And the current stairs are not to code, as I said, which, so with this project, the stairs will be safer and brought to code. And I'm requesting a setback of 6 feet onto my secondary yard where 15 feet is currently required.
Thank you. Any questions from the board at this point? Nothing? No? Apparently not. Anything else? Anything further right now?
For me, no.
No? Okay, thank you. Is anyone present who'd like to speak in favor of this proposal? Anyone in favor? Anyone on the Zoom, Mr. Stiff?
No.
No? Nobody on Zoom either? Okay. Anyone present who'd like to speak in opposition to this proposal? Anyone in opposition? Apparently not. Therefore, last call is 2 for or against. Anybody at all? Apparently not. Okay, that was simple. The public hearing is closed. Board, we've heard the proposal. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mantle?
I make a motion to grant approval to the variance request as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Rossi, I think, by a
Hair.
scooch. Yeah.
We'll take it out later.
Mr. Mantle, your motion.
Going through the criteria. You ready, Peter?
Sure.
Okay. 10.233.21. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. It would not be. It's a small request. Granting the .22. Granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. I believe it would. The proposed, there's no difference in the existing or the proposed as far as all the varying variances or zoning. .23, granting the variance would do substantial justice. I believe it would. It would definitely make the house better, and therefore the surrounding properties. .24, granting the variance would not diminish the value of surrounding properties. It would not. In fact, it would make the surrounding properties better. .25, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. I believe it would. As the applicant stated, she has a corner lot. So for those reasons, I made the motion.
Thank you. Mr. Rossi?
The only thing I have to add is that with regard to .23 and .24, there were no public comments submitted in opposition nor any abutter objections. Therefore, I think those are supporting facts for those requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything further from the board at this point before we call a vote, which will be roll call? Apparently not. Okay. We'll start down with Mr. Mantle.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Ms. Margison.
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge and Mr. Rossi.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So you're all approved.
Thank you, guys. Have a
You're
good night.
You're welcome. Thank you. Who said this is tough?
It's nice to have happy people.
Okay. Moving to item B, the request of Ann R. Landau Ballard, please correct my pronunciation, for property located at 55 Aldrich Road, whereas relief is needed to remove an existing front steps and construct a new deck and steps, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow a 2.5-foot front yard where 15 feet is required. 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be expanded, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 153 as Lot 44 and lies within the General Residence A GRA district. Who presents this to the board, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board. My name is Ann Lando Bello.
Thank you.
55 Aldrich Road.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing my request for relief. We've been under renovation for over 2 years, and we're at the point where we need to replace the front stairs in order to also put in the new driveway, which was approved. I'm proposing to replace the front steps and deck with a safe structure fitting in with the look of the improvements of the home as well as the neighborhood. As you can see, it's kind of an eyesore. We are asking to bring down the height of the structure, extend the deck along the house to accommodate a small seating space, pull the structure further away from the sidewalk, and pull the bottom of the steps away from the approved new driveway. And my 5 criteria that I'll go through. For 10-2-3-3-2-1, the request will not be contrary to the public interest as the current structure is poorly constructed, very tall, making it an eyesore in the neighborhood. The new structure will be more in line with the improved look of the home as well as safe and further away from the sidewalk. The spirit of the ordinance will be observed as the front steps are already non-conforming. Improving the front steps will not oppose the ordinance for my neighbors, but instead improve, as well as bring the front yard setback further away from the sidewalk. Most homes surrounding me in that area have their steps exit into the sidewalk or very close to the sidewalk, so it's similar. Substantial justice will be done, as no harm will be done with the improvement of the front steps, but it would be harmful to me without approval, as the current steps are of poor quality, pitching forward and beginning to fall apart. The values of surrounding properties will not be diminished, as replacing the front steps and making them in line with improvement of the home will only improve the property values of my neighbors' properties. And lastly, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship, as the front steps are already non-conforming. Denying what I feel is a reasonable request to replace and improve the steps would result in a continued use of a poorly constructed structure and set of stairs. The request will ensure the steps are safe to use, further away from the sidewalk, and less of an eyesore for my neighbors. I thank you for your consideration.
Okay, any questions from the board at this point? No, apparently not. Thank you. Are there any people present who would like to speak in favor of this? Anyone present like to speak in favor? Mr. Stith, do we have anybody on the? No? Anyone present who would like to speak in opposition? Anyone in opposition? Last call? No? Any speakers to, for, or against? To, for, or against? No? Okay, seeing nobody? Nobody? Okay. We'll close this public hearing. Okay, board, what's your thought? What's the thought on this particular application here? Ms. Eldridge.
I would move that we approve this application.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
A second.
Second, Mr. Lee, thank you. Ms. Eldridge, your motion, please.
Okay, 10.233.21, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. It would not be contrary to the public interest. This is improving the safety of the building and improving the look of the house. Same for .22, granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. Granting the variance, .23, would do substantial justice. The benefit to the homeowner is not outweighed by any harm to the public. It would not diminish the values of surrounding, .24 would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. If anything, an improved entrance would increase the values of surrounding properties. And as far as .25, unnecessary hardship, if this applicant wants to go out her front door, she cannot help but be in the setback. So I think there is a hardship here. And there's no difference It's even further back from the setback than it was before. So for all those reasons, I think we should approve this application.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
I concur and I have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. Any comment? Last call for comments from the board. Anybody at all? Okay, apparently not. We'll take a roll call vote again, starting down at the right, my left this time. Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Mr. Margis? Excuse me, Ms. Margis.
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
And Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, you're all approved.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Item C is up for discussion, and that reads as follows. The request of Seth Monkowitz, applicant for Ann Betty Ann Frazier, owner, for property located at 42 Harvard Street, whereas relief is needed for the upward expansion of existing garage and mudroom to create an attached ADU, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow a 22-foot front yard where 30 feet is required. 2, a variance from section 10.521 321, to allow a non-conforming structure or building to be expanded, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 259 as Lot 30 and lies within the Single Residence B, SRB district. Who presents this application to the board, please?
Good evening.
Good evening, yes. Go right ahead, please.
Go ahead. So I have here the,
Just for the record, your name and address, please.
Seth Monkowitz and 42 Harvard Street.
Thank you. Okay.
Welcome. So we're asking for the variance because we are trying to build up on the property to accommodate for an accessory dwelling unit for a daughter that's trying to move in because her mother's getting older and she's looking to take care of her in the future. So we are, as you stated, 22 feet from the front where we need to be 30, and we'd like to go up a second story in order to accommodate this. All the other sides of the property line are within the setbacks with great clearances. And then the section 10.23321, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest in the neighborhood, characteristics of the neighborhood, in that the unit will be constructed fully attached to the existing dwelling. In addition, the proposed exterior finish will make the new unit appear to be camouflaged into the existing structure and neighborhood. 10.233.22, the spirit of the ordinance will be observed because the variances are consistent with the spirit of the ordinance in that the unit will be camouflaged and constructed in the least invasive way. 10.233.23, substantial justice will be done because the unit will enhance the dwelling of the property owner at 42 Harvard Street with no impact to nearby residents of Harvard Street. 10.233.24, the values of the surrounding properties will not be diminished because the unit will be built attached and fully blended into the existing dwelling. There will be no visual impact to any other properties on the street. Instead, the increased value of 42 Harvard Street may help increase the value to other properties on the street and nearby streets. Also, there are 3 existing houses that have ADU units that directly surround 42 Harvard Street, so it'll fit in with the neighborhood. 10.233.25, the enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardships. The property owner is aging in place, and she is a longtime resident and doesn't want to move from this lovely town. To help her as she ages, her daughter will need a living space to be able to not only accommodate her needs, but her mom's as well. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the board? No? Okay, apparently not. Thank you. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in support of this proposal? Anyone present in support? Anyone on Zoom, Mr. Stiff? No? Maybe?
They haven't raised their hand.
Oh, okay. Anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition, please come forward. Anybody at all? No, apparently not. Same, clear on that? Okay, all right, good. Okay, last call, 2 for or against. Speakers 2 for or against. Anybody at all? No? Okay. We're all closed on the public hearing aspect of it. What's your pleasure on this one, board? Anyone? Mr. Lee?
This seems pretty innocuous, so I'd make a motion to approve this application as presented and advertised.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Rossi, thank you. Mr. Lee, your motion, please.
So I'll take the first two criteria together, 10.23321 and 2.2, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. This proposed use doesn't conflict with any explicit or implicit purposes of the ordinance and doesn't alter the essential character of the neighborhood, threaten public health, safety, or welfare, or otherwise injure any public rights. 10.23323, granting the variance would do substantial justice. In this case, the benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by harm to the general public or other individuals, so that element is satisfied. Number 4, the value of the surrounding property is not diminished. This proposed project will blend in with the neighborhood, and in my opinion, will not diminish the value of the surrounding properties in any manner. And moving on to number 5, literal enforcement of the ordinance would have resulted in unnecessary hardship. Because of the special conditions of the property, if you tried to build the ADU on grade, it would actually increase the lot coverage more than it is now. And for that reason, I think this proposed use is a reasonable one. And again, for those reasons, I move we approve this variance.
Thank you.
Nothing-
You're
nothing.
second, Mr. Rossi.
Nothing to add.
Thank you.
If I could make just clarification.
Yep.
Add a stipulation.
Well, yeah, I want to acknowledge something that wasn't advertised, and that's the lot area. When someone's seeking an attached ADU, the lot must be conforming, and so it's kind of a formality because it's not like a dimensional, it's just acknowledging. So I would ask the board to consider adding that as a condition, or just recognizing that you're granting the lot area that is less than the 15,000 required.
Which is what specifically?
13,039
For the
square
record.
feet.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Lee, agree?
I agree.
Okay, Mr. Rossi?
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. All right, good. Anything further? Yeah, Ms. Eldridge?
I have a question. While looking through the accessory dwelling unit requirements, one of the things it said is that an attached dwelling unit must have an interior door between the units. I'm pretty sure that's what it said under 10.814.41, and I don't think this does.
So that whole section will be reviewed for the planning board, and if they don't meet certain sections, they can request waivers from the planning
Okay.
board and work that out with the planning board, so.
Okay, that's good.
Good,
That's
good
good.
point. Thank you. Okay, anything further? Okay, we'll start down the right here. Well, the motion is to approve as presented and with the additional information just provided. Mr. Mantle,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Ms. Margison,
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge,
Yes.
Mr. Rossi,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. You're all approved.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
I'm not even going to say anything. Look how we're moving.
Second page already, wow. Item D, under new business, reads as follows. Request of Brian and Charlene Huston, owners, for property located at 44 Harding Road, whereas relief is needed to remove the existing deck and construct a new deck with stairs, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow 25% building coverage where 20% is the maximum allowed. 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming structure or building to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 250 as Lot 75 and lies within the Single Residence B SRB district. Who presents this proposal for the board, to the board, please? Anybody on Zoom? Yeah, no. You got anybody on? You got anybody on the Zoom? No.
Not for presenting.
Okay. Yes, good evening. Your name and address, please.
Ryan Houston, and my address is 44 Harding Road, Portsmouth. Thank you for listening to our request.
Oh, you're welcome.
So we bought this home back about a year ago, and when we bought it, we knew that we had to do a number of repairs and updating and things like that throughout the house. So we've done a lot of that stuff so far, including roof, siding, interior floors and kitchen, things like that. And now we've gotten to the deck and found out that, in fact, that we have a non-conforming lot, and we really don't have much square footage left with our current percentage that we will be allowed to build that lot on. But we think that we would still be within the spirit of the ordinance with that. And under the 5 criteria, building coverage, our current lot is non-conforming for SRB zone, which requires a 15,000 square foot lot. Our lot is 10,019 square feet, making it difficult for our hardship to meet the 20%, make it difficult in hardship to meet the 20% structure requirement. If our lot was conforming at 15,000, we would be able to easily build the square footage lot that we're requesting at 517 square feet. With a conforming lot, the proposed new deck, inclusive of the dwelling, would meet the 20% total structure allowance at roughly 17%. Using existing lot size, we would only be able to build a 9.8 foot square deck. We currently have a 200 square foot deck when we purchased the home that was put in there, I'm guessing, many, many years ago. Functionality. Absent deterioration issues, the current deck allows for efficient and safe access outside of our dwelling. Structure deterioration, the current deck is rotted with both decking and structural issues that make it unsafe. Replacement of the current deck will make the deck safe and usable. Design and appearance, the current deck is not like kind of quality of the other exterior improvements that we've made in the home, specifically new siding. Replacing the deck with like kind of quality materials will significantly improve the dwelling and appearance. And last, larger deck is needed to provide a large enough area to allow for usable space for chairs and tables and safe passage through in that area.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions at this point from the board? Apparently not. Thank you. Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in favor of this proposal? Anybody in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody opposed? Last call. 2-4 against. Any speakers at all? Mr. Stith, anybody on the machine? No. Okay.
Would you like to speak?
Apparently not. Oh, we have a speaker. We have a speaker there.
Sounds like he's in favor.
That was fair. Yeah. Take that as a yes. Okay. Okay, well, the public hearing's closed. Does someone have a motion with respect to this proposal?
Mr. Chair, before that, I would just note that in speaking with the applicant, that proposed deck at 14 feet would encroach into the rear yard, so they've agreed to move it back 2 feet
Okay.
so that it will be 12 feet deep. And that would remove, I think, 56 square feet, so the coverage would be lowered to 24.5% as opposed to the requested 25%.
Okay,
So
okay.
just consider that as stipulations if.
Okay, yes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have someone would have a motion? Mr. Rossi?
Yes, I'd like to move to approve the variance with the following stipulation, that the deck shall be 12 feet in depth and the allowed building coverage shall be 24.5%.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Second? Anybody? Second? Mr. Lee? Yep, thank you. Right, Mr. Rossi, your motion.
I believe this application satisfies the requirements of 10.233.21 and .22 together. The purpose of the ordinance will not be contravened at all by this deck, particularly as the additional space is kind of a wraparound into an interior corner of the building and won't be visible from the front of the property. It would do substantial justice because of the same fact. It has no impact on the surrounding properties, and therefore there's no loss to the public for doing this. The variance would not diminish surrounding properties. I believe this improvement will just raise the property value of this property and the adjacent ones as well by proximity. In terms of hardship, the small lot size is a factor in taking what is a reasonable, modest deck and putting it slightly outside of the percentage building coverage specifications of the ordinance, and that is a hardship that would prevent a reasonable use of the property. So I believe that's the property, that aspect is satisfied as well.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Nothing to add, and I concur.
Okay. All right. Anything further? Before we take a vote on this motion to approve with the stipulation as discussed? Okay. We'll start down on the left here with Mr. Rossi.
Yes.
Ms. Margerson? I'm sorry, Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margerson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
And Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you. You're all approved.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I don't think we've ever gotten applause.
We don't get applause
I think
very
that was for him.
Hey, Peter, are we missing 6 of the staff sheets?
What do you mean?
You know, where we have the block sheet that says existing and proposed?
No, it's in there.
No, it's not in my
Packet
packet.
should be before each application.
If you go to the bookmarks, you should be able to find it.
For this next one?
Because
Which one are we on? We're on
1 through 3 had them, 6 through 9 don't in
They
my
do.
upload.
At least on my package.
In my packet, too.
Yeah.
I think stopped working altogether. Still not working.
Paul, go to the bookmarks and just press on, what's next, Thaxter? No,
Yep, 38th extra.
Yeah.
38th Thaxter. Press on that. Don't press on the right arrow. Just press on 38th Thaxter.
We all set?
Yeah.
No? Yes?
Not on my upload.
Not on
so-
yours, not on mine either. Okay.
How can that be?
Okay. Let's move to item E, which is the request of Madison Tidwell and Brendan Barker, owners, for property located at 38 Thaxter Road, whereas relief is needed to construct a 14-foot by 25-foot rear second story over an existing structure, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow a 23-foot rear yard where 30 feet is required. 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be expanded, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 166 as Lot 36 and lies within the Single Residence B SRB district, who presents this project to the board, please? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing our requests. My wife and I, we moved to Daxter Road a few years ago with the intention of being a part of the community and growing a family. We are, as you can see, growing our family with our son here, and
Yeah, excuse me, just for the record, your
Oh, I'm
name-
sorry. My name is Brendan Barker, and I live at 38 Daxter.
Thank you. Okay, sorry to
me.
interrupt. Go ahead.
Yes. So we seek to build a master bedroom and a second full bathroom in the home to accommodate our growing family. We believe that the variance, or the addition of the master bedroom over the existing addition will not have any effect on public interest, that the addition will be more in keeping with the surrounding properties. We believe that the spirit of the ordinance will be observed and that it will be implemented for this purpose and to give relief to this type of use. Substantial justice will be done, and we believe that that will be done by granting variance and is in line with other variances issued. The value of the surrounding properties will not be diminished. The addition will be more architecturally pleasing than the existing roof on the structure, and it will not diminish surrounding values. Literal enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. Like I said, we have a growing family, and this would allow them to us to stay at our home and have a second bathroom in the house. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, bud.
Anybody on the board have questions at this point? Anything else? Anything you need covered? No? All right. Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in support of this proposal? Anyone present?
I do have a letter of support from a
Yes,
neighbor.
yes, please, yes. If you just start it, just hand it over there, and it becomes part of our package.
Thank you. Jimmy did this.
Okay. While we're doing that, is there anyone present in the room who'd like to speak in opposition? Anyone present who'd like to speak to, for, or against? Last call for speakers. Any speakers at all? Apparently not. Mr. Smith, anything on the Zoom? No? Okay. All right. Okay.
He's raising his hand.
He's in favor.
They can't have their own bedroom.
Okay. Everybody have a glance at the letter anyway? Okay. That being the case, nothing further. We'll close the public hearing. And we await a motion. Anybody feel inclined?
I think Paul was raising his hand.
I don't think so.
If not, I'll move to approve the variances.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi. Is there that's to approve as presented? All right. Is there a second to that motion for approval? Ms. Eldridge, thank you. Okay. Mr. Rossi, your motion, please.
With regard to taking 10.233 and 2.21, sorry, 10.233.21 and .22 together, granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. SRB is meant to provide family dwellings. This is a family that is proposing to make better use of the space to accommodate their family needs. Granting the variance would do substantial justice because by raising the addition on the second floor to the second floor, they're not encroaching on any of the setbacks, and therefore there's no loss to the public for their addition. Would not diminish the values of the surrounding properties. I submit as a fact for that is the supporting letter from abutters. and literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. Expanding the footprint of the property in other ways would create problems in terms of encroachment and area usage. So by the nature of the lot, this is the best way to accommodate the family's needs.
Thank you. Ms. Eldridge?
Nothing to add.
Nothing-
Thank you.
You concur and nothing to add? Okay, very good. Any final comments before we take the vote? No? All right. We'll start down with Mr. Rossi on the vote. The vote is to approve as presented. Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. You're all approved.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All these happy
He
people,
approves.
what's going to give?
All right.
No. Oh, okay.
Real elections should be this easy.
Bring them up for everybody.
Real elections ought to be this easy.
Yeah. Voting.
Okay, we're ready to address item F on the agenda this evening. And it reads, the request of ADL 325 Little Harbor Road Trust owner for property located at 325 Little Harbor Road, whereas relief is needed to renovate an existing historic barn, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.628.30 to permit a bottom/basement finished floor elevation of 8 feet where 7.88 feet exists, where 9 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 205 as Lot 2 and lies within the Rural R District. Who speaks in favor of this proposal, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, Tim Phoenix from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts, here tonight on behalf of the applicant. The actual applicant is my business partner, Steve Roberts, who's trustee of this trust for the benefit of Anthony DiLorenzo and his family, who, as I think you know, are the beneficial owners of the 12-acre parcel that anyone who grew up around here in the 60s and 70s calls Lady Isle. With me here tonight is Corey Caldwell from TF Moran. They've done the technical work. Aaron Sturgis is here from Preservation Timber Framing, who is a preservation timber framer. His life's work is rehabbing these kinds of structures and saving them to the extent possible. We may have Jim Youngblood, the builder, on Zoom. He was under the weather as of yesterday, so I don't know if he would make it. The primary difference, I don't think we'll need 20 minutes, but I'm going to have Aaron address the board as well as myself, so we might go there, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be brief. The primary difference between this application and most of the others tonight is we need a variance because we don't want to expand the building, whereas most of these are coming asking for minor expansions of the building. As you know, Lady Isle is 12 acres. There's a house currently under construction on it, and this has to do with the historic barn. Peter has put the site plan up on, and you can see the red line through the right-hand 1/3 of the property. You can see that line cuts through a very small portion of the barn, and that's the part that's in Zone AE Elevation 8. The existing elevation is just a couple inches lower than 8. And by the way, 8 feet is the FEMA requirement, so we would meet FEMA regulations. The intent is to pour a couple of inches of concrete to bring it up, the basement floor up to meet FEMA requirements, but the city requires an additional foot. This building is believed to be mid-18th century, so it's somewhere between 150 and possibly pushing 170 years old. The owner is painstakingly renovating it, as you saw from the comments from Mr. Sturgis in his submission for preservation purposes, and also his letter explaining to the board why we don't want to lift the building. And the reason we would have to lift the building is because if we were to make the basement floor at elevation 9, we'd have to pour another foot. The practical impact of that is it would leave less than the required headroom under the code for building code, which would require us to raise the building. And the practical problems with raising the building are severalfold. One is the cost, and the other is that we are concerned that the timber frame structure would be at some risk. You saw photographs that were submitted just after the original submission that showed beautiful granite pillars or piers that are holding up all of the timber. And if we have to lift it, I don't know how, but they wouldn't reach, so there'd have to be something done either between them and the timbers, or to take them out and put something on the floor and put the piers over it. Plus, the foundation is as old, pretty much as old as the barn. As Aaron will say, it's in very good shape considering its age. It's been there for a century and a half and has weathered all the storms to date. I just learned tonight that in addition to this project, there has already been a expansive project to greatly increase the seawall that's around. So that alone will have a mitigating factor on any storms or any floods. And as I've mentioned, only a part of the building is in the flood zone. It just doesn't make sense to have to raise it a foot in order to meet code for headroom when the foundation is going to take the brunt of any storm surge or flooding, and it's done that for 150 years and it's still standing and is in very good condition. So in summary, for the reasons that we don't want to meet the 9-foot requirement, it shouldn't be necessary given the age and location of the structure. It's all alone out there. It's affecting no one except the owner, who's aware of the risks. It is a basement floor, not a first floor. There's not mechanicals in it. As I mentioned, the cost, it would be cheaper for them, we believe, to tear the barn down and build something new in its place. But Mr. DiLorenzo wants to preserve it. He is a preservationist himself and wants to see this barn, which is an icon in the city, especially if you're in the water. It's very visible. We might lose the historic granite pillars. We might damage the historic structure. We might, if we lift the barn off as the historic foundation, we're going to have to put something above that foundation, which will then lose the historic character and nature of that foundation, because something that doesn't match is going to have to be placed put in its place. So, turning to the, by the way, the percentages of the building that's within the flood zone is about 16%, 447 square feet. The barn's about 2,000 square feet. So turning to the variance requirements, the first two, as always, the variances are not contrary to the public interest in the spirit of the ordinances observed. As I always do, I go through the 7 requirements of the purposes of the ordinance. I won't hit them all, but number 1 is the use of land, buildings, and structures for business, industrial, residential, and other purposes. As I pointed out, the entire barn is going to be renovated at a significant cost. The intent is to save as much of it as possible and keep it in its existing location. Elevation 8 complies with FEMA. The request is only for 1 foot. It achieves code-compliant headroom in the basement, avoids the cost and risk of damages to the structure, foundation, and those piers. Turning to 5 and 6 under the purposes, the rest of them are self-explanatory. The preservation and enhancement of the visual environment. We believe the visual environment will be greatly enhanced by leaving the building at its existing height with its existing foundation, the existing internal piers, and the like. And the preservation of historic districts and buildings and structures of historic architectural interest. This is a very important architectural interest, and the whole goal here by Mr. DiLorenzo and his team is to preserve it as closely as possible to its natural heritage. Turning to the underlying requirements for those first 2 variance requirements, one is, would granting the variance alter the essential character of the locality? It maintains the character of the locality, or would it threaten the public health, safety, or welfare? For the reasons I've stated, while there is some slight risk of floodwater going over 8 into 9, it's only the one building. The owner is aware of it. It affects nobody else, and the foundation is going to take the brunt of any flood. So granting the variance will not threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. The third requirement is that granting the variance will not diminish surrounding property values. There is no other buildings other than the ones that are part of this lot, this 12-acre lot and island, that are anywhere close. So granting the variance to leave this building where it is not going to affect anyone's property value whatsoever. We believe it will enhance the public's value by keeping it the way it has been historically for view purposes. The fourth requirement is the denial of the variances results in an unnecessary hardship. Three-pronged test. The first is that there are special conditions of the property that distinguish it from others in the area. Lady Isle alone, by its nature, is distinguished from any other property in the area. It's very large. The barns have been there for somewhere between a century and a half or more. The renovation will preserve as much as possible. The foundation is good and strong and has withstood whatever weather has come along in the last century and a half. All of these factors combine to create special conditions that lead to no real need to raise this building to be in compliance with the city's somewhat arbitrary 1 foot over the FEMA requirement. Second prong is that there's no fair and substantial relationship between the public purposes of the ordinance and its application. In this instance, clearly the reason to raise it another foot is to protect better against flood. For the reasons I've stated, a very small area of the barn is affected by it, but the whole barn has to be lifted as one. There's just no reason to apply the requirements of the ordinance under these circumstances, as I've explained them. Finally, the proposed use is reasonable. It's a residential use in a residential zone, so it's reasonable. The fifth and final standard prong of the hardship of the variance requirements is that substantial justice will be done. And the test there, under the cases I always cite, is if there's no benefit to the public that would outweigh the hardship to the applicant, this factor is satisfied. For the reasons I've stated, the public will not be harmed in any way by granting the variance, but the owner will be harmed by denying the variance, both potentially financially and for the public's benefit at the risk of harming or losing part of the historic structure, its foundation, or those piers. Because of the location, because this is a variance request for the flood zone requirements, there are 3 additional variance requirements under section 10.629.20. I'll go through them quickly. One is the variance will not result in increased flood heights, additional threats to the public safety, or extraordinary public expense. It's an island. Nobody's going to be affected except this lot and this building. Flood heights, to the extent they would be increased, it would be, you couldn't even measure it because any floods are going to hit the foundation walls before they find their way into the building. B, if the required variance is for activity within a designated regulatory floodway, no increase in flood levels during the base flood discharge will result. For the same reasons, it was unclear to me, and I couldn't find out whether we are in a designated regulatory floodway, but to the extent we are, the effect of any flood at this site will be de minimis. You couldn't even measure it. And finally, the variance is the minimum necessary considering the flood hazard to afford relief. This is the minimum necessary because if you raise that building at all, you're not going to meet your headroom, which means you're going to have to go up at least a foot, to meet the headroom requirements of the building code. So raising it a couple of inches to 8 feet to meet the FEMA requirement seems like a fair exchange for preserving this barn. I would like to have Aaron embellish a little bit because this is such an important structure, if I may have the time. 5 minutes, I promise.
Yeah, I think you have less than that, but.
All right. Yeah, okay, Will, yes, go ahead.
Okay. Aaron, you want to just...
My name is Aaron Sturgis. I run Preservation Timber Framing, and that's exactly what I do. I've worked in Portsmouth for over 30 years. I've worked on most of the house museums in town, and I've seen a lot of bad foundations and a lot of good foundations. And I understand the importance of the ordinance and the flood. We know that flooding is going to be a major issue in Portsmouth. It already is at Strawberry Bank. But the difference between something like Strawberry Bank or even the Moffett Ladd House, which has been chasing water since 1762, is that Lady Isle is on solid ledge, and the foundation is in excellent shape. It's a rubble stone foundation on 3 sides, and on the 4th side it is granite piers, and all the interior piers are granite, and they are on massive footers on ledge. So there's nothing wrong with the existing foundation that exists under the barn, and so that's one of the reasons why we don't want to change it, because it's working really well. If there were issues like Moffett Lad or Strawberry Bank, we'd be talking a different conversation here. But it's in excellent shape. The issue before us is the FEMA regulation versus the town regulation. There's a foot difference, and that foot means a lot to this barn. If we were to make it useful in the first, at the basement level, and it was always a basement, open basement, so you always went in under it, it's spectacular when you walk in. It is absolutely gorgeous. And to change that by elevating it a foot, first of all, we'd have to elevate it a lot more than a foot in order to change the granite piers, because we'd have to literally dig down under them, lift them up somehow, and get them back up the extra foot, because you're not going to add a foot on top of a beautiful granite pier. So there's a sequence of work that's significant. And then the other significant piece is the foundation is highly impacted when you unload it. Like the timber frame that's sitting on it that I'm going to repair, that Anthony asked me 3 years ago to do, is a means to which that foundation stays together. Okay, loading uniformly is important. So if I have to add a foot to that foundation, I have to lift it up, unload it, and then add, hopefully, close to the stone that's there. But I'll tell you what, each and every one of you would be able to tell the difference, not only there, but from the water. If we raise that up a foot, you're going to see it from everywhere. So we don't want to do that. So just historically, the context with the impact of the additional seawall work that's been done, this barn is better protected now than it has been for generations. There's no reason to change it. So I hope you go for the variance. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, unless there are questions.
Any questions for the applicant, either speaker? No? Okay, thank you, thank you. All right. Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in favor of this proposal? Anyone present? Anybody present? No? Anybody on the Zoom? No, okay. Anyone present who'd like to speak in opposition? Anyone present? No? And same, okay. Last call, 2 for or against. Any speakers who wish to speak in any fashion to this project? No? Okay. We'll close the public hearing. Okay, board. This is the first one of these that I remember. Wow. Ms. Margison?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve these variances as presented and advertised.
Thank you. Who's the Mr. Lee, thank you. Ms. Margison, your motion, please.
Okay. I'm just waiting for Peter.
Oh, thank you.
This is going to be a mouthful.
Mouthful.
So the first criteria is granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance, and I find that this variance application meets both of those. And the basic objective of the ordinance is, frankly, the city did decide to be more protective with flood levels and raise it from 8 to 9. However, the reality is that this is only for 16% of this barn. So therefore, I do not find that this violates the basic objective of the city's zoning ordinance, the essential character of the neighborhood. The whole island is not going to be altered, and there is no threat to public health and safety and welfare from allowing a portion of this building to be below the city's flood level. The third criteria is granting the variance would do substantial justice. There is no benefit to the public that outweighs the hardship to the applicant. This island has no abutters. There is no member of the public that will be benefited by us not granting this variance. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, this land is an island. There are no surrounding properties. Therefore, it meets that criteria. And literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. And I find that it also meets this criteria in that the property has special conditions that distinguish it from other properties in the area, in that it's the only property in the area. And so therefore, it doesn't really have, it has special conditions. And because of these special conditions, a fair substantial relationship does not exist between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of the provision to that property. And in this, again, the city of Portsmouth has decided to be more protective with flood zone levels. However, there is only 16% of this barn that is in the flood zone, and therefore it has special conditions, and it basically meets that condition. And the proposed use is a reasonable one. This is the rural district, and this is an appropriate accessory dwelling to the house within the rural district. So the proposed use for this barn is reasonable. And now on to the other three. You ready?
Very.
Okay. So the additional variance requirements are also met in that the variance will not result in increased flood heights, additional threats to public safety, or extraordinary public expense. Putting a portion of this barn within this flood zone will not increase flood heights. There are no threats to public safety, and it will not incur any kind of extraordinary public expense on the account of the municipality. The required variance is for activity within a designated regulatory floodway. There is no increase in flood levels during the base flood discharge. I find that the discharge, there is no increase in discharges from the barn in this flood zone. It has been there since the barn has been there. The variance is the minimum necessary considering the flood hazard to afford relief. And again, this brings it up to 8 feet, and that it meets that criteria as well. That was hard to do.
Very well.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Well, I'm in full compliance with everything Ms. Margison said, and I would just add that I was able to make a site visit to this property earlier, and met the construction superintendent who showed me around and showed me the barn and everything. And I think the only thing I could say about that is they don't build them like that anymore. I mean, it's massive timbers, big granite piers. It's been there a long time, and I think it's probably going to be there a long time to come. And it's pretty exciting to see somebody go to the expense and time to preserve this historic property. So I would be glad to second that motion.
Thank you. Any further comment from anybody on the board?
I will just add that under that section in the ordinance with the other criteria, there is a section that states that the board will notify the applicant in writing of 2 things, and we will add them to I don't think they need to be stipulations, but we'll add them to the letter decision, just notifying them that the required elevation may result in increased premium rates for flood insurance, up to amounts as high as $25 per $100 of coverage, and that such construction below the required elevation increases risk to life and property. So we'll just add those to the letter decision.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's appropriate. Anything further before we take a vote on this motion, which is to approve? Anybody at all? No? Apparently not. Okay, let's start down with Mr. Mantle. The motion is to approve.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
And Ms. Rossi?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. You're welcome. I think that's a first. We've seen that particular request.
Beautiful.
Okay. I have a trivia question for the board. The trivia question of the evening is, what was the last significant proposal for that island?
What was the
Is
what?
this a pop quiz?
It was a little while ago.
After it was a school?
No, after it was a school. After it was a school, yeah, that's right. Okay, all right. Everybody can be thinking about that. That's just a fun question, but it has an answer.
Tim has the answer.
I didn't hear the question.
Good question.
He might remember. Okay. The moving right along. Item G on the agenda is the request of John T. and Mary R. McDonald, owners, for property located at 74 Sunset Road, whereas relief is needed to add a front porch, a front dormer, and a connection to a garage, which requires the following. 1, variances from section 10.521 to allow a 16-foot front yard where 30 feet is required, and B, a 26.5% building coverage where 20% is required. A variance, 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be expanded, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 153 as Lot 14 and lies within the Single Residence B SRB district. Who presents this project, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Tim Phoenix from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts. I'm here tonight with and on behalf of John and Mary McDonald, who are in the front row. Butch Ritchie, who's doing the construction, is in the second row. Eric Weinreb from Altus Engineering did the site plans before you, and we gave him the night off. This shows pretty clearly what's happening. The dark orange is what's going to be new. You can see the front porch to the top of the screen. The existing front of the building is right on the setback line, which is just a little less than normally required because it's the average of the two on either side of it, which makes it 24 feet. The front's right on that. They want to add a front porch, and if you looked at the architectural's elevations, you saw how that is very tasteful looking and dresses up the house nicely. There's that dormer, that's the second floor dormer. This is a 4-bedroom house. It will remain a 4-bedroom house, but they're giving themselves a little bit more room with that dormer. That does not need relief because it meets the setback and it isn't expanding the size of the structure. You can see on the right side between the house and the garage, there's just a little connector, which makes sense given the proximity of that garage to connect them together so you can walk from the house into the garage. That adds a little bit of square footage, which is what drives the request for the increased coverage relief. In the back, you'll see there's a bulkhead that they're going to build a little doghouse roof over. That does not need any relief either. And then on the left, you'll see a little stairway. That's coming off, so that's going to improve that a little bit more. The lot is 8,936 square feet, and the existing coverage is 23.4%. So the McDonald's want to slightly expand their home. If you take a look at the tax map, I didn't do the numbers, but if you look at the homes on there, there's a number of them, especially across the street, that are also appear to be roughly the same distance from the front lot line. So this building is along the street there. It's the last yellow lot. I forgot to mark it along the street before it turns to gray, which is another tax lot. But if you look at the homes across the street and next to it, many of them appear to be just, I used a scale to measure it. They appear to be roughly the same distance, 15, 18, 20 feet off the line as this. So it does fit in with the neighborhood. As mentioned, the building coverage limit is 20%. It's already 23.4%. We think these modest additions of the breezeway to connect the house and the nice looking porch, which increases to 26.5%, is reasonable and fair under the circumstances. So turning to the variance requirements, again, the first two, the variances are not contrary to the public interest, and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. I'll just cut right to the chase. The Malachi Glen case that I always cite says, would granting the variances unduly and to a marked degree conflict with the ordinance such that it violates the ordinance's basic zoning objectives? Mere conflict is not enough. And the way the courts have boiled that down is, will granting the variances alter the essential character of the locality? It's a modestly sized house on a small lot, as are many in that area along that street. As I mentioned before, just scaling it off, it looks like many are a bit closer to the lot line. I didn't do a calculation of coverage, but under the circumstances, this will not appear much larger because it's not getting any closer to the neighbors on either side. There's still ample distance for sight lines, for stormwater treatment, and Eric has designed a drip edge, stone drip edge to catch water coming off of that roof, which will mitigate any stormwater issues from the new roof. So we believe that granting these variances, which are relatively minor given the size of the lot and the home on it, will not change the essential character of the locality. They will be built to code, so there is no threat to the public health, safety, or welfare. The third of the 5 requirements is that the variances will not diminish surrounding property values. We believe that these changes enhance the look. You can see the look here, that it's dressed up nicely with that front porch and the dormer above it. The connector breezeway probably won't even be noticed by anyone. It's very, very small. This property value will be increased, so we see no way it's going to decrease surrounding property values. The fourth requirement, as I always submitted, is the hardship. First is special conditions. The lot at under 9,000 is 40% smaller than the 15,000 square feet that the SRB would require. It is in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood. The home is right on the front lot line. The two sides of the building, the side of the house and the side of the garage, are on or slightly over the right and left setbacks. You can't put a front porch on without adding it to the front of the house, and the only place you can put a breezeway is to connect it to the house to the garage. These all combine to create special conditions, and for the reasons I've stated, there's no reason to limit the coverage to 20%. It's already over 20%. This increase will really be not noticeable by anyone except the owner. And as far as the setback, again, it looks to be consistent with the setbacks of many of the homes across the street and in the area. So there is no fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance with respect to expansion, setback, and coverage and its application here. Finally, for the hardship, the proposed use is reasonable, a residential use, so it's reasonable. And then finally, last test, substantial justice will be done. If there's no benefit to the public that would outweigh the hardship to the applicant, this factor is satisfied. That's the Harborside case. Again, for the reasons I've stated, the front entry porch is reasonable in 21st century Portsmouth. It's a nice addition. It'll let them enjoy their home a little better than they can today. And the breezeway will protect them from in the winter when they want to go from the house to the garage to get in a car or get their snow shovels or whatever they're going to get. There's just no harm to the public from granting these variances, but denial of the variances, if you will, robs the John and Mary of the ability to a nice, modest expansion of their home to make it more livable and more enjoyable. So for these reasons, we request that the variances be granted. I'm here to answer questions. John and Mary are here if you have questions that I can't answer, and of course, if there's construction questions, Butch is here to answer those.
Thank you. Any questions from the board at this point?
I have
Mr. Ross.
just one little, right here. I have one little thing I might need some help with.
I didn't know who was speaking.
That's okay. That's why I'm waving my arms. With regard to the hardship requirement, so applicant must establish that the property is burdened by the zoning restriction in a manner that is distinct from other similarly situated properties. So since the surrounding properties are almost identical in terms of size and setbacks and all that, how would you suggest we think about that?
Sure. Well, not all of the houses are identical. There's ones that are directly across the street seem to have similar setbacks. I don't know about coverages, but I think there's other lots in the area or on that tax map that are larger with larger homes on them, et cetera, that appear to meet setbacks and probably meet coverage. But there's also a case I did not cite here. I have cited it before with you folks before. It's a Manchester case, as I recall, and it basically says that another basis for hardship is if you are doing something that's already being done in that area, that is a form of hardship that allows you to proceed with getting your variance granted.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board right now? No, apparently not. Thank you. Is there, excuse me, is there anyone present who'd like to speak in favor of this proposal? Anyone else to speak in favor? Apparently, yes, no, okay. Anyone present wishing to speak in opposition? No? Mr. Stith, anybody on the?
Lost all our viewers.
All of you.
Can't believe
We won't ask. We won't ask why.
Can we take the excitement?
Last call for speakers. 2 for or against. Anybody wishing to speak? 2 for or against? Apparently not. And we're clear on the Zoom side as well. Okay, very well. We're closed in the public hearing phase of the proposal. Who wants to start the discussion or perhaps a motion? Anybody?
I'd make a comment.
Mr. Lee.
So I was able to go through this house back when it was for sale several months ago, or maybe a year ago, whenever that was. And, you know, it's a nice house in a nice neighborhood, but it was burdened by kind of an awkward floor plan. And I think the proposed improvements they're looking to do make perfect sense to me, and I think that would make the house much more livable and enhance the values in the whole neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the board? Any comments at this point? No? Does anyone feel prepared to make a motion?
I will.
You will, Mr. Lee?
I'd move that we grant this variance as presented and advertised.
Is there a second to the motion? Anybody? Second?
I'll second.
Ms. Margison? Yes, thank you. Okay, Mr. Lee.
All right, well, taking the first two criteria together, 10.233.21 and .22, granting this variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. The proposed use here, again, is not in conflict with the explicit or implicit purpose of the ordinance and doesn't alter the essential character of the neighborhood, threaten public health, safety, or welfare, or otherwise injure any public rights. Substantial justice is done because the benefit to the applicant here is not outweighed by any harm to the general public or any other individuals. Doing this addition and renovation of this property would certainly add to the value of the surrounding properties, not diminish in any way, so number 4 is satisfied. Number 5, literal enforcement of this ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. This property is somewhat burdened by a zoning restriction that makes it distinct from other similarly situated properties. Because of these special conditions, a restriction is applied to this property doesn't serve that purpose in a fair and substantial way. And the proposed use here I find to be very reasonable and doesn't alter the essential character of the neighborhood. So in my mind, that satisfied number 5, the hardship criteria. So for those reasons, I would move that we grant this application as advertised and presented.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Margison?
I would just add that I had the same question that Mr. Rossi did, and I find that it's Walker versus City of Manchester applies, and that there's existing nonconformities in the area, and that constitutes a special condition.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anybody, any further comment before we take the vote? Anybody? Last call? No? All right. Apparently not. Okay. Get my sheet here. We'll start down at my right this time. Mr. Mantle.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Ms. Margison.
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge.
Yes.
Mr. Rossi, and I vote yes as well. Okay. You're all approved.
We all have our
You're welcome.
Okay, so look at this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Everyone's putting up and so therefore it's okay. You don't
All
have
right.
to do it. Okay.
Okay.
Item H is next on the agenda. And it reads as follows. Request of Neela LLC owner for property located at 324 Maplewood Avenue, whereas relief is needed to convert an existing garage into a dwelling unit which requires the following. 1. Variances from section 10.5A 41.10A to allow A lot area per dwelling unit of 1,780 square feet where 3,000 square feet is required, and B, a 1-foot side yard where 5 feet is required. 2, a variance from section 10.1114 8.21 to allow an 8.5-foot wide by 18-foot long parking space where 8.5 feet by 19 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 141 as Lot 1 and lies within the Character District 4-L2, CD4L2, and the Historic District. Who presents this project, please?
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Monica Kaiser from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts. With me is Nicole Abshire, principal of Neela LLC. And we're prepared to proceed when you're ready.
Yes, please go right ahead.
Peter, could I trouble you to start with the tax map?
Don't do it, Peter.
I suppose I don't know that I needed the tax map to tell you this, but the property's highlighted here, and what I want to make clear to you is that Nicole lives right next door. We also have a butter support from the person immediately behind the property, or I guess you would say next to the property. You have a letter in your packet from Miss Jordan, and she is directly above the property, if you will.
Excuse me, Attorney Kaiser, is that 334?
Yes.
And then the applicant lives in 31?
Yes.
Okay.
And there is, I believe there may be another abutter here to support the application, and then there's also support from a gentleman over here on Prospect Street, I believe lot number 16. So out of the gate, I just wanted to orient people about who lives where. If you can go back to the site plan now, Peter. I think you're probably well oriented to the property. We drive by it every day. Cabinet Concepts on Maplewood. I talk about in my memorandum the blue structure and the garage. So this here is the blue structure holding part of Cabinet Concepts, and there's an apartment on the second floor. Over here is this garage structure as it sits, 1,080 square feet. In it is some related showroom and workshop area for the cabinet shop previously. Nicole, who lives over here, and the former owners back here, in the past, and I assume I'm going to address Fisher v. Dover for you. I did address it in my memorandum. But in the past, there have been a number of different proposals about what to do just with this garage. I mean, going back over time, the property's been before you, but specifically the garage has been before you twice in 2009. And both times, Nicole opposed any expansion of this property, any upward expansion. Previous proposals, the first one in 2009 was to add 2 stories on top of the garage for a total 3-story structure. And then later that was reduced to propose a 2-story structure. The first proposal was 2 additional dwelling units in addition to the dwelling unit over here. The second proposal was for only 1 additional dwelling unit, but it did involve upward expansion. The setbacks have been referred to in a number of different ways over the previous years. In consultation with Peter, this is how I've identified them. This property technically fronts on Maplewood. That's the address. So Maplewood is our front. That makes this lot line over here our rear. It makes this lot line here our side, and I guess this is a secondary front. So a lot of confusion, and I did have to revise the memorandum a couple times. I hope you're looking at the most recent one because I was getting my sides and my rears mixed up. The important proposal here that is different from what we've done before is that we're not proposing any physical changes on site at all. So there's a garage that sits 1 foot from that side lot line between this property and Miss Jordan. That's going to stay the same. And the primary reason, as I understand, that we need relief, even though we're not changing anything physically, is simply because we're converting this to dwelling. And so that conversion is taking place 1 foot from this side lot line, where I believe 5 is required. Am I right about that, Peter?
Yes.
The other request for relief is to allow an interior parking space in this building that's 8.5 by 18 feet instead of 8.5 by 19 feet. To just identify the rest of the lot, I understand that, parking is a reasonable thing for you to inquire about. There are some spaces over here that have been here for a long time. There's not quite 3 spaces there because of the stairs. So we only count 2 spaces here. You can fit 2 compliant spaces here that are outlined on the plan, and then 1 compliant space in the garage. As a practical matter, in the past, people have sometimes also parked in front of the garage here, although our preference would be to utilize that interior space there. If there's no questions about Fisher v. Dover, I'll keep going.
I don't think, just, I don't think it applies. I don't know if we have to make a finding when we rule, but just a question, because you talked about 2 stories on top. It does seem like it's, I'm not very good at architecture, but it does seem like it is going up 1 story. Or is that just?
No, no. I think you might be looking at, are you looking at the staff memo?
It's a picture of the proposal they made
That's
10 years ago.
That's the picture of the proposal that was denied.
Okay.
So if you look at
Oh, I get it. Okay, sorry.
You get it?
Okay.
So elevation views of our proposal is on sheet A3 of Exhibit B. So we're literally just taking that garage and making it a little bit nicer and renovating the inside and retaining a parking space. So I think that's a distinct difference from the previous proposal. The other thing that's different is that the zoning has changed, and the ask is a lot less. The lot size and the lot size per dwelling unit is smaller for the CDL4, CD, you know what I mean? And the setbacks are shorter and less than they were back in 2009. We are still asking for an additional dwelling unit, but we think it makes sense, given the way the lot is laid out. It's rather unique. If there's no more questions about Fisher v. Dover, I'll just turn to the variance criteria.
Does anyone have a concern about Fisher versus Dover? No. I think it's significantly different. Okay. Yes, yes, please proceed.
Thank you. I understand that Attorney Phoenix and I have a similar format, so I'll try to be brief because I'm not telling you anything new. But in any event, if you look at page 3 of my memorandum, I start with the 5 variance criteria. I take the first 2 together under the Malachi Glen case. And I go through and I identify each of the purposes of your ordinance and why we need it. The primary issues, the primary themes are we're repurposing a building that's already there. We're not doing anything to create a new structure. We're simply repurposing an existing non-conforming structure that essentially results in no change to any of the setbacks. We would submit to you that the parking is satisfied on the lot with the 8.5 by 18 foot parking space. And so the parking is adequately addressed. No change, obviously, to on number 4 purposes, impacts on lighting, noise, vibration, and the like. No change there. You're improving the visual presentation of the building. It's subject to Historic District Commission oversight. And in terms of groundwater, surface water, things of the like, there's just irrelevant or no change. We would submit to you that the granting the variance doesn't markedly conflict with the ordinance, undermining the basic zoning objectives, and also that it doesn't alter the essential character of the locality. The CDL4 zone I think you have in your staff packet, there's just a cluster of little properties there that are in the CD4 section. Going up Dennett Street, it changes zone, and going the other way, it changes the zone. But in terms of the properties in that immediate area, there are a couple that are either non-conforming for lot size per dwelling unit, lot size, or setbacks just on those four corners. There were few enough in the zone that I didn't think it was helpful to make you a tax map showing those, but we did look at that, and I would submit to you that this is in line with those surrounding properties in the CDL4 zone. CD4L2, yes. We also looked at the master plan, which seemed to recognize some opportunities to expand housing opportunities in some of these urban neighborhoods. I think this is a decent example of that. Granting the variance will not diminish the surrounding property values, precisely because we're not going up, we're not going out, we're just utilizing what's there, and we're not trying to overdo it. We have a decent sized structure there of 1,000 some square feet. There's a way to utilize it that's not just for parking. Furthermore, the abutters recognize that and are in support of the proposal, particularly the most affected abutter to the side, or behind Dennett Street, if you will. Denial of the variance results in unnecessary hardship. As you know, it's a three-part test, starting with special conditions of the property. I think it's a funny-shaped little property, and it's also developed in a weird way. It's triangular in shape. It's got a pinch point in the middle. It's got two structures on it at opposite ends, both very close to the lot lines. Anything we do there is going to require relief, and so for that reason, I think the property has special conditions. There's no fair and substantial relationship between the general purposes of the ordinance and its application. Again, for a number of the reasons that I've already said, we're not looking to go up or out. We're just looking to utilize space that's already there in a way that is economically beneficial for the owner, but also provides a modest downtown apartment that's needed in Portsmouth, and makes use of this property and this particular structure on the property in a way that makes sense. Side yard setback is going to remain the same. The interior parking accommodates the vast majority, if not all, cars at 18 feet long. I've already talked about the master plan. Proposed use is reasonable. The test is if the use is permitted, it's deemed reasonable. So because duplexes and apartments are permitted in this zone, as are mixed uses, I think this works and satisfies that criteria of the hardship test. And lastly, the final criteria is that substantial justice will be done. The test is if there's no benefit to the public that would outweigh the hardship to the applicant, the factor is satisfied. Another way of looking at it, any loss to the applicant not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. Again, I think as acknowledged by the abutters, there's nothing that they would gain from denial of this. That structure's already there. The neighborhood has sort of accommodated it and accommodated the use of it on the inside for the cabinet shop. It's not a big difference to have that area used as a dwelling unit, and provided the parking is accommodated, it's a win for all concerned. And certainly any denial to outweighs the hardship, doesn't outweigh the hardship to Nicole. If you don't have any further questions, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Is any questions from the board? Any questions? Apparently not. Thank you. Anyone present wishing to speak in support, please come up, and your name and address, please, if you would.
My name is Walter Horman. I live at 56 Dennett, which is kitty corner across the street. And I speak in support of this project. Of all the proposals that have happened for this property over the years, this is certainly the one that has the least impact on the neighborhood, in that The building isn't changing significantly. The footprint's the same, the size is the same. It's not trying to cram several stories onto this tiny property. As far as the allowing this to be a dwelling unit, it would, again, fit more into the property area in that there's multiple multifamily, single-family, and that use would fit much more into the neighborhood than commercial use that it is presently. So I would support this project.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? No? Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Anybody else in favor? Anybody else, any opposed? Anyone wishing to speak opposed? We have anybody on Zoom, Mr. Stith? No. Yes, 2, 4, or against? Yes, come up, please.
Good evening. First and foremost, thank you all for what you do for this city. I acknowledge you. I'm pleased to be here with you, and thank you. Nicole has been my neighbor for over 15 years. Everything she has done has been honorable and forthright. If you visited the site, they indicated her house on the left-hand side of the project. She has invested easily over $100,000 into that property. The foundation has been done, the siding has been done, the trim has been done, the windows have been done, the roof has been done. Okay? Everything is restored to like and kind to what it was originally built. What more can you say about somebody who does that for your city? Okay? The project as proposed, okay, I think is outstanding. Again, you constantly hear in the city a shortage of property, rental property. Here you have something very simple. You have an existing building, and I know in my heart, my mind, that it will be refurbished to belong, not to be out somewhere else. Recently, in the city on Maplewood Ave, you have just seen a McMansion built. Okay, you ought to hear the comments in the neighborhood. Okay, here we go, where you get one that slams the hell out of everybody, and then you have the opposite, where you have a very decent human being who has put time, effort, and care into her property. What more can you ask for such a wonderful neighbor for 15 years?
Thank you, sir.
all.
Can we have your name and address, please, for the record, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
George Dempsey, 42 Dennett Street. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey.
Thanks, George.
Anybody else present? 2, 4, or against? Last call for speakers. Is the Zoom clear?
It is clear.
Clear, okay.
Clear on Zoom.
Zoom clear.
We are closed with the public hearing. Okay. Does someone have a comment on the proposal here, or perhaps even a motion?
There might be a motion down at this end.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi.
I would make a motion to approve the variance as submitted.
Thank you. A second up for bid? Oh, I think,
No, I was
Ms. Elder.
pointing actually to Paul.
all right, Mr. Mantle, all right, you win.
Okay, so with regard to the specifics of the motion, with Section 10.233.21 and .22, the spirit of the ordinance in this zone is to create spaces that are walkable, mixed use, and of human scale. Since there is no change in the scale of the building, this proposal has does not in any way diminish the walkability or the scale, the human scale of the neighborhood. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. We've heard from abutters that they perceive no loss to themselves. I agree that there is no loss to the public. In fact, there is a gain to the public by increasing the housing stock, and therefore there's no loss to the public that outweighs the benefit to the applicant. And likewise, because of the statements of the abutters, we can be assured that granting the variance would not diminish the value of their properties. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. It's a very oddly shaped lot. I'm not even sure what to call it, other than a irregular polyhedron. It's really, I commend you for being able to identify a front, back, and side to that shape. It's not easy. Therefore, I think it's very hard to literally apply the setbacks. With regard to the garage dimensions, 18 feet is adequate to fit even a large full-size sedan. It's with room to spare. It wouldn't fit a light-duty truck, but neither would a 19-foot garage. So I see no purpose in creating a hardship around the garage because it just, the ordinance is not really providing any benefit by complying to it. So that's my motion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mantle?
I have nothing to add. You did a great job.
All right, thank you. Ms. Margison?
So I'll also be supporting the motion, but I just want to add that the lot area is a significant change. I mean, there is 3,000 minimum, and it's halving it to 1,780. So that is a significant ask. However, I do note that there is already a structure there on that lot, so. And all other setbacks, except for the right yard, which is not becoming any more non-conforming, all other setbacks are met.
Yep, great. Okay, yeah, it's an existing building. That's the main feature, I think. Yeah. Okay, anybody further? Anything further? No? In that case, we're going to take a roll call vote, and the motion is to approve. Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. You're all approved. You're welcome.
I learned I have to fast when my name is called.
This is scary, a straight run of 7 O's. Okay.
On that city council.
I don't think does everyone agree we're still 20 minutes from our 9
Yeah.
o'clock break, so we'll charge forward. Mr. McDonald?
Mr. Chairman, I received a letter from the planning board informing me that I'm in a butter on item I, Regis Court. Is that one that we're taking up next?
You're with it? Yes, Regis Court, yes. The
So I
magic
have to-
number is within 300 feet of the project, if you live within, that's the radius of.
If you got an
that
abutters
you got
notice,
in-
you're in
you
a
get a
butter.
notice, yeah.
I have not measured the distance.
Don't do it.
However, in my opinion, I'm not in a butter because it's a block away.
So we measure that radius from the parcel, and then we send out notices to all properties within 300 feet.
Okay,
You might not be a direct abutter, but
This is as the crow flies.
so I'm,
You're free.
But it's really your decision. It really, it's up to the individual conscience. Is whether you feel you have any sort of a conflict or not. That's what the law says.
I don't think I have a conflict, but I think I am in a butter, and so I will recuse on this application.
That's your choice. It's entirely your choice. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right. Okay. Moving along to item I. The request of Jeffrey and Melissa Foy, owners, for property located at 67 Ridges Court, whereas relief is needed for the expansion of an existing main roof and front porch roof and addition of a new roof over a side doorway. which requires the following. 1, variances from section 10.521 to allow A, an 8-foot front yard where 30 feet is required to expand the existing front porch. B, a 13.5-foot front yard where 30 feet is required to expand the main roof of the house. C, a 13.5-foot front yard where 30 feet is required for a new roof over an existing doorway. And D, a 9.5-foot left side yard where 10 feet is required for a new roof over an existing doorway. 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow any non-conforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 207 as Lot 59 and lies within the Single Residence B SRB district. Who presents this project, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Tim Phoenix from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts here in Portsmouth. I'm here tonight on behalf of Jeff and Melissa Foy. Jeff is with me in the front row. Also with me is John Shagnon of Ambit Engineering, who's prepared the plans before you. I feel a little bit of explanation is necessary. I'll say in front of you and to Mr. Foy, I don't think I've acquitted myself very well on behalf of Mr. Foy with this project, because I've discovered a couple of things that were not discovered when I was here last month. If you'll recall, we were here last month with the addition that was in the wetland buffer and also needed setback relief. There was a fair amount of neighborhood opposition and the board denied it. That was not appealed. I want for full disclosure, I want the board to know that we will be coming back with a modified proposal for an addition, which is smaller, et cetera. So I just want you to know that's coming. What we've discovered after I submitted the first application you heard last month and this one is that the setback requirement for this house is not 30 feet. 30 feet is the underlying, but I missed, and anyone who looked at it missed until I met with Peter a couple of weeks ago to look at it, that there's a provision in the ordinance that says if you've got homes next to you within 200 feet that are less than the required, you can go to the average. So the real setback on this lot for the front setback is 19 feet. The only reason that's important today is because my relief requested 30 feet because they're raising the rear roof within 30 feet. But since that's 19 feet, we don't need the relief to raise the roof. So the only thing we're here, I've submitted a withdrawal last week. The only thing we're here on, and it is, Peter did, thank you, Peter, note this in his staff report. The only thing we're here is for the front entry, which is being expanded slightly, and we'll show you in a minute, and a little eyebrow roof over a side door. It's a little hard to see there. That's the plan that shows when we thought it was a 30-foot setback. I have submitted an updated plan that's not. But if you can go to the ones where I've got the circles on the elevations. Keep going.
Keep going.
I thought.
So this is the revised.
Oh, that's the revised one?
Let me check this.
Okay. So in your packets that were originally submitted, I cleverly submitted copies of the elevations with a circled of the area where we're looking for the relief today. And looking at the house from a side view, the front entryway, it goes out and then it goes down and then it goes out again at a slant. And basically we're filling that in so that it's a very slight expansion of the front entryway roof. And over there's a man door, a walk-in door on the, boy, I talk a lot, don't I? There we go. So, so number one is the one that we withdrawn. That was where we were raising that roof, and I thought it was within the required setback, but it's not. You can see number two at the top. That's the existing home, and you can see how that entry roof it got a little notch in it, and they're going to extend that roof so that it goes all the way out to the pillar and then comes down. So it's just that tiny little expansion of that rectangular area. Go to the next page. And then on the side, you can see where I've circled the nothing. There's a man door there, and down below I've circled it again. There's a little what I call an eyebrow roof over that man door, which is a little bit too close to the front lot line and a little bit too close, like 13 point some odd feet, where 19 would be required, and from the side setback, it's 9.5 where 10 feet would be required. So that's all we're asking for tonight, is just those two very small changes to the house to dress it up a little and provide some additional cover from the weather if you're going in and out of that door. Originally, there was another eyebrow roof over the garage door on the left front, but that's been removed and we're not going forward with that. So the changes are extremely minor for this ask. And again, one of the reasons I made my comment about the FOIs is that those features were on the one last month, but I didn't realize it. It never came up that those were add-ons as opposed to the original house, so we didn't ask for them. So we've come back to clean that up and ask for these now. So again, turning to the requirements for these tiny little variances, public interest and spirit of the ordinance, clearly these are not going to change the essential character of the locality. The front roof is essentially aesthetic only, and the side roof, the only one who's affected by it is the neighbor at 46. And I don't know if the board got it, but I do have a letter that John Shagnon gave me that he found on the public site website for today, around 5 o'clock. Has the board seen this? Yeah, okay. So this is 67, this is 49 is it? Yeah, 49 Ridges Court, which is the first neighbor to the left as you're looking at the house, the one who would look out and see that eyebrow window, and they have supported it. So granting these variances in a circumstance where if you're going to make these little additions, you got to put them on the house, and the house is where it is, the door is where it is, the front door is where it is, so there's no way to accomplish this without these minor variances. They will not alter the essential character of the locality, and they will not threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. Similarly, I think the new front addition looks better than the one that's on there now. I think it's more inviting, dresses the house up a little bit, has a little bit of character and whatnot. And the eyebrow roof is just for protection, and the neighbor that would see it doesn't care. It's further back from the front than the front corner or front face of the house. There's going to be an increase in value of this house by these little touches, so it's not going to diminish surrounding property values. Turning to the hardship, the special conditions, again, the house is where it is. It's within the required front setback. Today, it's very close to the required side setback, so we need about a ½ foot side setback relief and about a 2 foot front setback relief for the eyebrow window that's number 3, and an area of, I don't know, 1 cubic foot or so for the expansion of the front entry roof. The special conditions are that the house is where it is, and you have to put these little touches on it where the doors are. There's no reason to apply the specific setback requirements under these circumstances. The front roof is not getting any closer than it is today. It's just being expanded ever so slightly. The side roof is almost unnoticeable, so there's no reason to prevent it. The proposed use is reasonable as it's residential. Finally, substantial justice is done. If there's no benefit to the public that outweighs a hardship to the applicant, this factor is satisfied. Clearly, these very minor additions to the house that require these very small variances are not going to affect the public in any way, negative way whatsoever, but denying it in turn denies the FOIs of dressing up the front of their house and providing a little bit of weather protection and another architectural feature on the side. That's all I got. Unless Jeff has anything he wants to add? Or John, no? We're here to answer your questions if you have
Okay,
any.
thank you. Any questions from the board? Ms. Marges?
So it's a little bit confusing, Attorney Phoenix. So you're saying that these are variance requests that you meant to include in the application we heard last month?
These features were on the proposed plans. They weren't significant enough that I noticed it, and I don't remember everybody telling me, so we didn't ask for them. They were on the plans, but we didn't make the request. The only request we came for before you last time was that addition that you denied.
Okay, thank you.
It is confusing, and I'm the confuser, so I apologize.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? No, apparently not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in favor? Anyone else present who'd like to speak in favor? Anybody on the Zoom?
No one on
Mr.
Zoom.
Stith? No? Okay. Anybody present wishing to speak in opposition? Anybody in opposition? Anybody wishing to speak to, for, or against? Last call for speakers, seeing nobody, and we have nobody on the Zoom, so we're all clear. So the public hearing is closed. What's your pleasure, board, on these requests?
I actually am in favor of the requested variance, but I don't want to do all the work, so I'm waiting for somebody else to make the motion.
There's a frank statement. Who feels,
I guess we're all feeling
who feels inclined to?
Done 3 tonight.
Oh, heck.
Very good job.
Yeah.
You've done a very good job.
Come on, Paul.
That's a yes? Shrug, I think?
I don't like this board pressure.
How many has Paul done?
One.
One, yeah.
Mm-hmm. We've all, and not done. Okay.
Anybody feel?
I will
Ms. Eldridge,
move.
thank you. You're gonna make the motion?
And you can all help. I will move that, that we approve this.
Thank you. All we need is a second from Mr. Lee. Thank you. Ms. Eldridge, your motion,
Okay.
please.
So granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. The changes that are being made to this house will not affect anybody but this house, and they are minor changes. Granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. It would do substantial justice. There is nobody that is going to be harmed by this change, and the owner of the property will benefit to the degree that they'll be kept out of the weather and have the aesthetic changes that they would like for their home. It certainly won't diminish the values of the surrounding properties. It may not increase them greatly, but it is certainly not doing any harm to the properties. Literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship for the owner, and the variances that they are asking are very minor, very much like what exists at the house right now. And, if they want to cover over their door, there is no way that they can have it without some infringement on the property. So for those reasons, I would suggest we approve this petition.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
I concur with Ms. Eldridge's motion. I'm in full support and happy to second.
Thank you very much. Any further comment before we take the motion? We take the roll. Ms. Margison.
So I just want to know for the record that these are for front yard and left yard setbacks. The left yard setback is a de minimis change. It's a rounding error, basically. And the primary front yard setback is definitely less significant given the front yard averaging under the zoning ordinance. So these setback requirements really are about overcrowding of properties, movement of light, air, stormwater, whatnot, and therefore I don't believe that there is any violation of the spirit and intent of the ordinance with this variance application.
Thank you. Okay. Last call for comments. If not, we'll take the vote. Mr. Mantle.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald is recused. Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Ms. Margison.
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge.
Yes.
Mr. Rossi.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. You're welcome. This is a record. We have a clean slate of 7-0 votes.
Crazy.
And it's 8:59.
Right up there
And
with
it's
city council.
8:59. That's right.
Yeah, Tim went 3-0.
Yeah, you did.
There you go.
All that's left is does someone want to make the, what Charlie used to say, the favorite motion of the evening?
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi. Mr. Lee, okay. And it's what's the official time? 8:59?
9 o'clock and 5 seconds after.
Okay.
This little dude has a Danny's little clock there.